The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the cooling fans inside the overhead projector, a rhythmic, mechanical purr that seemed to count down the seconds of Sarah's career. She stood on the stage, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlight, wearing the vintage Chanel dress I'd helped her pick out 3 months ago for what she called our big night. Her smile was perfect, the one she practiced in the mirror when she thought I wasn't looking, bright, confident, and utterly predatory. In front of her sat the board of directors for the Sterling Group, the most prestigious architectural and design firm in the country, along with 300 of the industry's most influential critics. They were all staring at the massive screen behind her, waiting for the final reveal of the Elysium project, the masterwork that would cement her status as a visionary. Sarah took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the remote, her eyes meeting mine in the wings for a split second. She didn't see a threat, she saw a footstool. She pressed the button, her voice honeyed and triumphant as she began to narrate the inspiration behind the design she had spent 6 months stealing from my private drives. I watched her face, waiting for the exact moment the pixels would shift, waiting for the blood to drain from her cheeks when she realized that the files she had surreptitiously copied weren't the final renders, but something else entirely. The air in the ballroom felt heavy, pressurized, like the moment before a massive glass structure shatters under its own weight. But to understand how we got to this moment, we have to go back. Before we continue the story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for more videos like this. It's funny how we look back at the beginning of a disaster and realize all the warning signs were actually flashing neon lights that we chose to treat as soft, ambient glows. Sarah and I were inseparable for 15 years. We met in a sophomore design studio, two girls with ink-stained fingers and big dreams of reshaping the world skyline. I was the one who stayed up until 4 a.m. perfecting the line weights and the structural integrity of our models, while Sarah was the one who could walk into a room and convince a professor that our project was the second coming of the Renaissance. We were a team, or so I thought. I was the engine, and she was the shiny, polished hood. For a long time, that arrangement worked for me. I'm naturally quiet. I find comfort in the details, in the silent logic of a well-executed blueprint, in the way light hits a specific texture of marble at sunset. I never needed the applause. I just needed the work to be perfect. Sarah, on the other hand, fed on the oxygen of a crowded room. She needed the gaze of others to feel like she existed. I used to think of it as a beautiful symmetry, my substance, her style. I didn't realize that style, when left unchecked by a conscience, eventually starts to consume substance just to keep itself fed. If you're listening to this, maybe you've had a Sarah in your life. That person who calls you their soul sister while they're quietly measuring your shadow to see if it's long enough to hide their own flaws. You settle into the comfort of a long-term friendship like a favorite chair, never noticing that the legs are being sawed off 1 inch at a time. We shared everything: passwords, keys to our apartments, the most intimate details of our creative processes. I trusted her with my thoughts before they even became sketches. Looking back, I wasn't just giving her my friendship, I was giving her a roadmap to my mind. I want you to take a moment and think about the person you trust most in the professional or creative world. Imagine every secret you've told them, every vulnerability you've shown. Now, imagine them using that information not to support you, but to replace you. It's a cold realization, isn't it? It's the kind of chill that doesn't go away with a sweater. It's a bone-deep frost. But as I stood there in the wings of that ballroom, I wasn't cold anymore. I was the most focused I had ever been in my entire life. What Sarah never understood about me, the hidden advantage she overlooked because she was too busy admiring her own reflection, was that my silence wasn't a lack of power. It was a method of data collection. When you spend your life observing the world so you can recreate it in design, you learn to see the microshifts in people's behavior. You notice when a smile doesn't reach the eyes. You notice when someone starts using I instead of we. You notice when files in a shared cloud drive have been accessed from an IP address that doesn't match the office. I am a meticulous record keeper. It's part of my job and it's part of my soul. I log every iteration, every draft, every time-stamped thought. I have a digital paper trail for my life that goes back a decade. Sarah thought I was just organized in a cute, slightly neurotic way. She thought my habit of backing up every single conversation and design phase was a symptom of my anxiety. She didn't realize it was my insurance policy. I stayed silent for months after I first suspected she was siphoning my work. People ask me why I didn't confront her the moment I saw her pitching my private sketches to a junior partner as her late-night brainstorms. The answer is simple. If you catch a snake in the grass too early, it just slithers away and hides until you forget it's there. You have to wait until the snake is so confident, so bloated from its meal, that it can't move. I needed her to be fully committed. I needed her to believe, with every fiber of her being, that she had successfully outsmarted the quiet, sensitive girl. I wanted her to build her entire future on the foundation of my work, because I knew exactly which brick I was going to pull out to make the whole thing crumble. Power isn't about shouting, it's about knowing where the structural weaknesses are. And Sarah, for all her charisma, was nothing but structural weaknesses. The patterns of her betrayal were subtle at first, like a slow leak in a basement that you don't notice until the floorboards start to rot. It started 3 years ago when we both landed senior roles at the same firm. We were supposed to be co-leads on the Aurelia project, a boutique hotel in the city. I did the heavy lifting, the spatial planning, the material sourcing, the complex lighting grids that made the lobby feel like a cathedral. Sarah handled the client relations. One afternoon, I walked past a conference room and heard her talking to the lead developer. She was saying, I really struggled with the lighting grid for the lobby, but then I had this epiphany at 2 a.m. My heart did a strange little stutter step. She was using my words, my epiphany, and she was presenting it as her own singular triumph. When I asked her about it later, she laughed it off. Oh, Elena, you're so sensitive. I just said because it's easier for the client to have one point of contact. You know we're a team. I was just selling our vision. She was so good at it. She made me feel like the difficult one for wanting credit for my own brain. She'd lean in, touch my arm, and say, don't be that person, the one who fights over scraps of ego. We're bigger than that. And, because I valued the friendship more than the credit, I let it slide. I let it slide when she took the lead on the industry panel. I let it slide when she was photographed for the designers to watch list while I was back at the office fixing her technical errors so the building wouldn't literally collapse. I watched her learn my patterns. She learned how I organized my layers in Photoshop. She learned the specific naming conventions I used for my CD files. She was studying me, not to learn the craft, but to learn how to mimic the craftsman. It was a parasitic relationship, but she dressed it up in the costume of a sisterhood. By the second year, the gaslighting became more aggressive. Sarah started suggesting to our superiors that I was struggling with the pressure or that I was going through a bit of a creative block. She would offer to take some of the load off my plate, which really meant she wanted access to my raw files before I had a chance to present them. I remember one specific night, we were working late on a museum proposal. I had spent weeks developing a revolutionary sustainable glass facade. I showed her the prototypes, and she looked at them with a strange, blank expression. The next morning, she was in the CEO's office with a rough idea that was a carbon copy of my facade. When I confronted her, she looked me dead in the eye with a mask of pure concern. "Elena, honey, are you okay? We talked about this idea together yesterday, don't you remember? I think you're just really tired. Maybe you should take a few days off. I'll handle the presentation so you can rest." That was the moment the scales fell from my eyes. It wasn't just ambition, it was a calculated attempt to erase me from my own career. She wasn't just stealing the work, she was trying to steal the reputation of the person who created it, while simultaneously painting that person as mentally unstable. I realized then that every girls' night, every bottle of wine we shared, every secret I'd whispered to her about my fears and dreams was just research for her. She was using my vulnerability as a weapon. She knew I hated public speaking, so she made sure I was never the one at the podium. She knew I was a perfectionist, so she used that to keep me trapped in the back room while she played the face of the firm. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot and messy. It was a quiet, crystalline resolve. She thought she was playing a game of checkers, and she thought she'd already taken all my pieces. She didn't realize I was playing a different game entirely, and I hadn't even made my first move yet. The Elysium project was supposed to be our masterpiece. It was a multi-billion-dollar development in Dubai, a city of the future that required the most innovative architectural thinking of the decade. This was the project that would win the Sterling Prize. Internally, the firm decided it would be a competition between the senior designers. The winner would be named a partner and given their own dedicated studio. Sarah knew she couldn't win on her own merit. She didn't have the technical depth to design a birdhouse, let alone a sustainable metropolis. So, she did what a snake does. She coiled. She started checking in on me more often. She brought me coffee, told me how much she missed our collaborative energy, and slowly worked her way back into my workspace. She acted like the last 2 years of friction had never happened. I let her in. I acted the part of the tired, slightly frazzled friend who just needed help. I even started venting to her about how I was keeping all my best ideas in a separate, encrypted drive because I didn't trust the firm's server. I saw the way her eyes lit up. It was like watching a predator spot a wounded animal. I made sure she saw me typing in the password to that drive, a password that was easy to guess if you knew my mother's maiden name and my first pet. I left drafts of the Elysium project in folders labeled final_do_not_open. These drafts were beautiful. They were breathtaking. They were also, from a structural engineering standpoint, completely and utterly impossible. They were designs that looked perfect on a screen but would violate every law of physics and zoning if actually built. I spent weeks meticulously crafting a failure that looked like a masterpiece. While Sarah was busy helping me by secretly copying those impossible files onto her own thumb drives during our lunch breaks, I was working on the real Elysium project. I did this in the dead of night, on a completely disconnected laptop, in a small studio apartment I'd rented under a different name across town. I was living a double life. By day, I was the struggling designer being supported by her best friend. I would let Sarah see me working on the flawed files, pretending to grapple with problems I had intentionally created. I would sigh and say, "I just can't get the cantilevered gardens to balance, Sarah. I think I'm losing my touch." And she would pat my hand, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, and say, "Don't worry, Elena. Just keep trying. It'll come to you." All the while, she was already planning her independent presentation using those very gardens as her centerpiece. I watched her become increasingly arrogant. She started dressing differently, more power suits, more expensive jewelry. She began taking private meetings with the Sterling Group board members, whispering in their ears about her solo vision for Elysium. I heard through the office grapevine that she was telling people I had withdrawn from the competition due to personal health issues and that she was stepping up to save the project. It was perfect. She was digging a hole so deep she wouldn't even be able to see the sky from the bottom. Every time she lied about me, every time she stole a file, I logged it. I had a hidden camera in my office that recorded her opening my desk drawers. I had keylogger software on my own computer that recorded every time she plugged in a USB drive. I wasn't just preparing a design, I was preparing a dossier. The week before the big presentation, Sarah dropped the bombshell. She sat me down in a public cafe, always the performer, and told me with tears in her eyes that she was leaving the firm to start her own boutique agency. And the kicker? She had already signed the Sterling Group as her first client for the Elysium project. She told me she couldn't wait for me to get better, and that she had to protect the integrity of the work we started. She actually had the audacity to offer me a job at her new firm as a junior researcher. "It'll be less stress for you, Elena. You can just focus on the little things while I handle the big picture. It's what's best for both of us." I sat there, looking at her, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. She was so convinced of her own brilliance that she had forgotten I was the one who taught her how to use the software she was currently using to betray me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded slowly, let a single tear roll down my cheek for effect, and said, "I understand, Sarah. I just hope you know what you're doing." She smiled, that predatory, perfect smile, and stood up. "I always know what I'm doing, babe. See you at the gala." She walked out of that cafe thinking she had just ended my career and started her empire. She didn't realize she had just walked into the center of the target I'd been painting for 3 years. The night of the gala arrived. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. The who's who of the architectural world was there, all gathered to see the unveiling of the Elysium project. Sarah was the star of the show. She was circulating, glass of champagne in hand, accepting congratulations for a project she hadn't even presented yet. I stayed in the shadows, wearing a simple black dress, blending into the background as I always did. I had one job that night, to hand over the final presentation file to the tech booth. Sarah had her stolen version, of course, but she wanted to make sure she had the absolute latest one from my drive, just in case I'd made any last-minute improvements. She'd intercepted me in the hallway an hour before, demanding my drive. I gave it to her with a shaking hand, acting like I was giving up my last scrap of dignity. "Thank you, Elena," she whispered, her eyes cold. "You've been a great friend. I'll make sure to mention you in the footnotes of my speech." She took the drive and hurried to the tech booth to swap it out with her own. She didn't check the file names. She didn't open the folders. She was too intoxicated by the proximity of her own triumph. She handed the drive to the technician, told him it was the master file, and then made her way to the stage. I walked to the back of the room, found a quiet corner near the exit, and waited. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, a calm, rhythmic beat that matched the humming of the projector. Sarah began her speech. It was a masterpiece of narcissism. She talked about her journey, her struggle with the complex geometries of the Elysium project, and her commitment to a sustainable future. She looked like a goddess up there, and the audience was captivated. "And now," she said, her voice rising to a dramatic crescendo, "I would like to show you the future of urban living. The final, completed designs for Elysium." She clicked the remote. The screen behind her flickered. But instead of the beautiful, impossible gardens she expected, a video began to play. It wasn't a 3D render. It was a screen recording of my private drive. The audience gasped. On the massive screen, they saw a cursor moving through folders. They saw Sarah's IP address logged as an unauthorized user. They saw a side-by-side comparison of my original, time-stamped sketches from 3 years ago and the new design she was claiming as her own. The video showed the metadata, the digital DNA of every file, proving that her work had been created on my computer, under my login, months before she ever touched them. And then, the most damning part, the video transitioned to a series of hidden camera clips from my office. There was Sarah, clear as day, rummaging through my desk, copying files, and laughing to herself as she tucked a USB drive into her purse. The audio from the camera was crisp. They heard her voice on the phone with a recruiter, saying, "I've got all of Elena's best work. She's too weak to stop me. By the time she realizes it's gone, I'll be partner." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a physical weight, a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Sarah stood frozen on the stage, the remote still clutched in her hand. The spotlight, which had felt like a warm embrace moments ago, now looked like a harsh, interrogative glare. She turned to look at the screen, her mouth hanging open, her face turning a ghastly shade of gray. She tried to click the remote to stop the video, but I had instructed the technician, who was an old friend of mine from college, to lock the feed. The video continued, showing the impossible structural flaws I'd built into the fake design she'd stolen. A red overlay appeared on the screen, highlighting exactly why the buildings she was pitching would collapse within a week of being built. The words "structural failure," designed by amateur, flashed in bright, bold letters across her masterpiece. Sarah turned back to the audience, her voice a shrill, desperate squeak. This is a mistake. This is a prank. Elena, what did you do?" She looked into the wings, but I wasn't there. I was standing at the very back of the room, perfectly still. Every head in the ballroom turned to look at me. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The evidence was 40 feet tall and glowing behind her. The CEO of the Sterling Group stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't look at Sarah. He looked at the screen, then at the board members. The critics were already on their phones, the scandal spreading through the industry at the speed of light. Sarah's Elysium had turned into a digital execution. She started to sob, a messy, ugly sound that echoed through the silent hall, but no one moved to comfort her. The snake was finally caught in the open, and there was nowhere left to hide. The fallout was swifter than I had even imagined. Sarah was escorted out of the building by security before the gala was even over. The Sterling Group didn't just fire her, they blacklisted her. In an industry built on reputation and intellectual property, stealing from your partner is the ultimate sin. Her boutique agency folded before it even opened its doors. Every client she had tried to poach returned to our firm, terrified of being associated with her. But the most satisfying part wasn't the professional ruin, it was the silence. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't have her voice in my ear telling me I wasn't good enough, or that I was too sensitive, or that I needed her to be my face. I didn't stay at the firm either. I didn't want to be the victim of the Sarah scandal. I used the real Elysium project, the one that actually worked, the one I had designed in secret, as my portfolio to launch my own practice. The Sterling Group tried to buy the designs from me, but I refused. I wanted to build it my way, with my name at the top of the masthead. Sarah tried to call me, of course. She sent dozens of emails, alternating between begging for forgiveness and accusing me of destroying her life. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't even block her. I just let the messages sit there, unread, a digital graveyard of a friendship that had never really been a friendship at all. I realized that the greatest power you can have over someone like that is to simply stop acknowledging their existence. You don't have to fight a ghost. You just have to stop believing in it. A year later, I was standing on a different stage. This time, it was for the opening of the first phase of the real Elysium. The sun was setting, hitting the sustainable glass facade exactly the way I had imagined it years ago, turning the building into a pillar of golden light. I looked out at the crowd, people who respected the work, people who understood the value of integrity. I didn't feel the need to practice my smile in the mirror. I just felt a deep, quiet sense of peace. I had learned that silence isn't a weakness, it's a strategic reserve. I had learned that you don't need to shout to be heard, as long as what you're saying is the truth. I heard Sarah is working in high-end retail now, somewhere in a different city where no one knows her name. She still posts on social media, trying to project an image of success and new beginnings, but the comments are always turned off. She's still the same person, a shiny hood with no engine, but she no longer has anyone to provide the substance she lacks. She's just a hollow shell, drifting from one performance to the next. Sometimes, I think about that night at the gala, and the only thing I regret is that I didn't realize sooner that I never needed her in the first place. I was always the one with the power. I just had to be willing to use it. Looking back at everything that happened, I've realized that some people are like ivy. They don't have their own structure, so they wrap themselves around you, looking beautiful and green, while they slowly choke the life out of the tree that supports them. You might think you're being a good friend by letting them climb, but all you're doing is providing the means for your own downfall. If you have someone in your life who takes more than they give, who minimizes your achievements, or who treats your talent like a shared resource they have a right to exploit, pay attention. Don't shout. Don't react. Just observe. Collect your data. Build your own structure. And when the time is right, don't be afraid to let them fall. They aren't your responsibility. Your integrity is. The world is full of people who want to take the shortcut to success by stealing the path you've already cleared. But they forget one thing. They don't know the terrain like you do. They don't know where the traps are, and they don't know how to survive when the lights go out. Trust is a currency, and once someone goes bankrupt, no amount of charisma can bail them out. I'm glad I learned that lesson when I did. It cost me a 15-year friendship, but it gave me my life back. And that's a trade I'd make every single time. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to reclaim your own voice from someone who tried to steal it? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about boundaries, consequences, and the power of standing your ground. Until next time.